I wasn't supposed to meet her. That's the simplest way I can explain it. Even now, 2 years later, sitting in an apartment that still doesn't feel like mine. At the time, my life was already mapped out. Not in a dramatic, my parents forced me way, but in the quiet, comfortable way things just fall into place. I had a stable job, a long-term girlfriend, and a lease signed 6 months in advance. We talked about getting married like it was just another step, like renewing a subscription. Nothing felt wrong. That's the part that still bothers me. I met her on a Tuesday. I almost skipped. Work had been brutal, and I remember sitting in my car outside the grocery store, thinking I could just go home, order takeout, and pretend I'd be more productive tomorrow. But I went in anyway, mostly out of guilt. She was arguing with the cashier. Not loudly. Not in a way that made a scene. Just stubbornly. The kind of argument where you can tell neither person is actually upset. They just refuse to be wrong. It rang up wrong, she said, holding up a receipt like it was evidence in court. The cashier shrugged. That's the system. Well, your system is wrong. I should have walked past. Instead, I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it, and both of them turned to look at me. The cashier looked annoyed. She looked amused. Something funny? She asked. Yeah, I said. You're definitely going to win that argument. She tilted her head, studying me for a second. Then she smiled. And just like that, everything started to shift. She didn't win the argument. But she didn't lose either. After a few more minutes of back and forth, the cashier sighed, called a manager, and eventually gave her the discount just to end it. She walked away with this quiet, satisfied look, like she hadn't just saved a few dollars, she'd proven a point. I ended up behind her in line. Congratulations, I said, setting my basket down. You defeated the system. She laughed, soft and quick. It wasn't about the money. Of course it wasn't. She glanced at my basket, frozen meals, energy drinks, nothing that required effort. You don't strike me as someone who argues with systems. I pick my battles. Or you avoid them. That should have annoyed me. It didn't. We talked for maybe 3 minutes. Nothing deep. Names, small observations, the kind of conversation you forget 5 minutes later. Except I didn't forget. Her name was Lena. She worked nearby, something creative. I didn't catch exactly what, because I was too focused on the way she spoke, like every sentence had already been thought through twice before she said it. When we both stepped outside, the air was cold enough to sting. She stopped on the sidewalk. You're the kind of person who plans everything, aren't you? It was such a strange thing to ask that I laughed. What makes you say that? You hesitated before you bought those meals, she said. Like you were calculating how many days they'd last. I frowned. That's normal. Maybe, she said. But you still counted. I didn't know what to say to that. She looked at me for a second longer, like she was deciding something, then pulled out her phone. Give me your number. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to, but because, for the first time in a long while, something felt off script. I have a girlfriend, I said. It came out automatically, like a rule I was supposed to follow. Lena didn't flinch. Okay, she said, still holding out her phone. Then give me your number as someone with a girlfriend. I should have said no. I knew that, even then. Instead, I took her phone. I told myself it didn't mean anything. That's the first lie people like me tell. Not the big, dramatic kind. The small, reasonable ones that sound almost responsible. We exchanged numbers. That was it. No promises, no plans. No, we should hang out. Just a name saved in a phone and a quiet understanding that we might never talk again. That should have been the end of it. When I got home, my girlfriend was already there. Emily was sitting on the couch, legs tucked under her, laptop open, half watching something while answering emails. She looked up when I walked in and smiled the way she always did. Warm, familiar, safe. Hey, she said. You're late. Work ran over. I replied, setting the groceries down. Another small lie. Easy. Automatic. She closed her laptop and stood up, crossing the room to kiss me. It was routine, comfortable. The kind of affection that comes from years of knowing exactly where you stand with someone. How was your day? She asked. Busy. Nothing interesting. That was the moment I could have mentioned Lena. It wouldn't have even sounded suspicious. Just a random story about a woman arguing with a cashier. Something to fill the silence while we unpacked groceries. But I didn't say anything. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I already knew it wasn't just a story. That night, we ate dinner in front of the TV. We talked about her co-worker's engagement, about rent going up, about a wedding we were supposed to attend in a few months. Normal things. Planned things. At one point, she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Do you ever think about how easy this is?" I glanced at her. "Easy. Us," she said. "No drama. No games. We just work." I nodded. Because she was right. We did work. There was nothing broken. Nothing missing. No big fights. No silent resentment. If someone had asked me then, I would have said I was happy. And I think I believed it. Later, after she fell asleep, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, my phone on the nightstand beside me. It buzzed once. Just a single notification. I knew who it was before I even picked it up. Unknown number. "Did you end up counting how many meals you bought?" I stared at the screen longer than I should have. I could have ignored it, deleted it, pretended it never happened. Instead, I typed back, 6. Enough to last me 3 days. There was a pause. Then, 3 days is optimistic. I found myself smiling. And that's when I realized something I didn't want to admit. I was already waiting for her next message. The messages didn't stop after that. They weren't constant. That's what made it easy to justify. Lena didn't text like someone trying to pull me in. There were no good morning messages, no "what are you doing?" check-ins, no pressure. Sometimes she wouldn't reply for hours. Once, she disappeared for almost an entire day. And yet, I kept thinking about her. Our conversations stayed light at first. Observations. Small jokes. The kind of exchanges you could show someone else and say, "See? It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Because I started noticing when she hadn't replied. I'd check my phone more often than I needed to. I'd reread her messages, catching details I missed the first time. Emily noticed too. Not the messages. Not at first. But she noticed me. "You're on your phone a lot lately," she said one evening, standing in the kitchen while I leaned against the counter, typing a reply. "Work?" I said, without looking up. She nodded, but there was a slight pause before she turned back to what she was doing. Another small lie. Easier than the last. A week after we met, Lena asked me a question that shifted everything. "Are you actually happy?" I stared at the message for a long time. It felt unfair. Not because it was invasive, but because it was too direct. Like she'd skipped past all the polite layers and gone straight to something I hadn't even been asking myself. "Yes," I typed. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, "Or are you just comfortable?" I put my phone down. Emily was in the living room, laughing at something on TV. The sound carried into the kitchen, familiar and warm. "Comfortable." I picked up my phone again. "Is there a difference?" This time, Lena replied immediately. "Only when you start wondering." I didn't answer after that. But I didn't need to. Because the question stayed with me long after the conversation ended. It followed me through the next few days, through work meetings, through dinners, through quiet moments when everything should have felt normal. And the worst part was, nothing had changed. Emily was still kind, still supportive, still someone I could rely on without thinking. If anything, she was exactly the person you're supposed to end up with. Which made what I was feeling even harder to explain. Because there was no reason to question anything. Except now I was. I tried to pull back after that. Not in any dramatic way. I didn't block her or tell her we shouldn't talk. That would have made it real, and I wasn't ready to admit there was anything real to stop. I just slowed down. Took longer to reply. Kept my answers shorter. Stayed on safe topics. Work, weather, small things that didn't matter. For a couple of days, it worked. Lena didn't push. If she noticed the change, she didn't say anything. She matched my pace, like she understood exactly what I was trying to do. That should have made it easier. It didn't. Because now, instead of thinking about her when she texted, I was thinking about her when she didn't. I'd catch myself checking my phone, then feel stupid when there was nothing there. I started noticing gaps, hours where we hadn't talked, and wondering what she was doing instead. I didn't like that version of myself. So I told myself I was done, that I'd let the conversation fade out naturally. No confrontation, no explanation. Just silence, stretched long enough to become permanent. And then Emily asked me something that ruined that plan. We were lying in bed, lights off, both of us half asleep. She shifted closer, resting her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever think about where we'll be in 5 years?" she asked. I hesitated. "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes." "What do you see?" It was such a simple question. One I should have answered easily. But for the first time, I couldn't picture it clearly. I saw fragments. The same apartment, maybe a different one. A ring. A wedding. The kind of life we'd always talked about, step by step. But it felt distant. like something I was supposed to want, rather than something I was actually reaching for. Emily waited, quiet, patient. Probably the same as now, I said finally. Just more settled. She smiled against my shoulder. I like that. I didn't say anything. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure I did. The next morning, I woke up before her. The room was quiet, still dim with early light. My phone was on the nightstand, screen dark. I stared at it for a moment. Then I picked it up. There was a message from Lena, sent late the night before. I saw something today that reminded me of you. I shouldn't have opened it. I definitely shouldn't have replied. But I did. What was it? Her answer came a few minutes later. A guy standing in the cereal aisle for 10 minutes. Couldn't decide what to choose. I exhaled, a quiet laugh slipping out before I could stop it. Emily stirred beside me, shifting slightly, but she didn't wake. I looked at her for a moment, then back at my phone. And without thinking, I typed, "You don't know me that well." 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Not yet. That was the moment everything stopped being harmless. After that, the line didn't just blur. It disappeared. We still didn't call it anything. That would have made it too obvious, too heavy. But the conversations changed. They got longer, deeper, more personal. Lena started telling me about her life. How she'd moved cities twice in 3 years. How she couldn't stay in places that felt predictable. How she once quit a job without another one lined up, just because she woke up one morning and knew she couldn't spend another day there. "You don't ever get that feeling?" she asked. "That you're in the wrong life?" I stared at that message for a long time. Emily was in the other room, talking on the phone with her mom. I could hear her laughing, describing something about wedding plans for her coworker. I typed, deleted, then typed again. No. Another lie. Lena didn't argue. She just said, "I think you do. You're just better at ignoring it." That should have made me pull away. Instead, I told her things I hadn't said out loud before. Not big confessions. Nothing dramatic. Just small cracks in the image I'd built. That sometimes I felt like my days were repeating. That I couldn't remember the last time I made a decision that wasn't expected. That everything in my life made sense, but didn't feel like it belonged to me. She never told me what to do. That's what made it worse. She just listened and asked the right questions. One night, we talked for hours. Emily had gone to bed early, exhausted from work. I stayed in the living room, lights off, phone in my hand, watching the time slip past midnight. At some point, Lena asked, "Do you love her?" The question hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was complicated. "Yes," I typed eventually. There was a pause. Then, "But," I closed my eyes. Because there it was. The part one hadn't said. The part one didn't want to admit, even to myself. I thought about Emily, about the years we'd spent together, the plans, the comfort, the way everything between us was steady and predictable. I thought about Lena, about how a conversation with her could shift my entire mood, how she made me question things I'd never questioned before. And I realized something that made my chest feel tight. Love wasn't the problem. It was everything around it. "I don't know if that's enough," I finally wrote. This time, Lena took longer to respond. When she did, it wasn't what I expected. "It's not fair to her if it isn't." I stared at the message. Because for the first time, Lena wasn't pulling me closer. She was pushing me to make a choice. I didn't make a choice. Not right away. That's another thing people don't like to admit. How long you can stay in the middle when you don't want to face the consequences of moving in either direction. After that conversation, I told myself I needed time. Time to think. Time to understand what I was feeling. Time to figure out whether this was real or just something new that I was mistaking for something important. Lena didn't text the next day or the day after. At first, I told myself it was good, that it gave me space, that I needed the distance. But by the third day, the silence started to feel heavy. I checked my phone more than I should have, opened our last conversation, reread it, like there was something I'd missed. "There's nothing more to say," I muttered to myself. But there was. There was everything I hadn't said. On the 4th day, Emily came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen, half-heartedly cooking something that didn't require much attention. She walked in, set her bag down, and leaned against the doorway, watching me for a moment. "You've been quiet lately," she said. I didn't look up. Just tired. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stepped closer, resting her hand on the counter beside me. "Did I do something?" she asked. That made me look at her. There was no accusation in her voice, just concern. And that made it worse. "No," I said quickly. Of course not. Then what is it? I hesitated. Because there it was again, the moment where I could tell the truth. Or at least part of it. But the truth wasn't clean. It didn't fit into a single sentence. It wasn't something I could explain without breaking something in the process. So I chose the easier option. Work's just been stressful, I said. She studied me for a second, like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. Then she nodded. Okay, she said softly. If you say so. She kissed me on the cheek and walked away. And I stood there, staring at the stove, feeling like I'd just crossed a line I couldn't step back over. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the same way I had a week ago, but everything felt different now. Heavier. More real. I reached for my phone without thinking. There were no new messages. I opened our conversation anyway. Scrolled up, down, up again. Then, before I could stop myself, I typed, "Are you going to disappear again?" The message sat there for a second. Then I hit send. The reply came almost immediately. "I was waiting for you to decide." My chest tightened. Because I hadn't. Not really. I stared at the screen, my mind racing through all the possible answers. All the ways this could go. All the things I could lose. And still, I didn't put the phone down. "I haven't decided," I typed. It felt weak the second I sent it. Honest, maybe, but still not enough. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then again, like she was writing and rewriting something. Finally, her reply came. "Then don't text me." I stared at the screen, my heart starting to pound. "That's not fair." I wrote back. "It took longer this time. Neither is what you're doing." I sat up in bed, careful not to wake Emily beside me. The room felt too small suddenly. "I'm not doing anything," I typed. Even as I sent it, I knew how ridiculous it sounded. There was a long pause. Then, "You're building something with me while staying with her." I swallowed. "That's not true." Another pause. Then a message that made it impossible to keep lying to myself. "If she saw your messages, would you say that?" I didn't answer. Because I couldn't. And she knew it. A minute passed. Then another. Then her final message came. "You don't get to have both. Figure it out. But don't include me until you do." The screen went quiet after that. No more typing. No follow-up. Nothing. Just silence. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, staring at the last message like it might change if I waited long enough. It didn't. Next to me, Emily shifted slightly in her sleep, turning toward me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. It was such a small, automatic gesture. Comfort. Familiarity. Everything I'd built my life around. And for the first time, it felt like a weight. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had convinced myself of something simple, that I needed to end it. Not with Lena, with the situation, with the confusion, with everything that was making me question my life. And the only way to do that was to choose. Emily woke up just after I got out of the shower. She smiled when she saw me, still half asleep. "Morning," she said, her voice soft. "Morning." I stood there for a second, watching her, trying to find the words, trying to figure out how to say something that would change both of our lives. "I think we need to talk," I said. The smile faded, just slightly. "About what?" I hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. "Us." She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her. "What about us?" My chest felt tight. Because this was it. The moment everything became real. And there was no way to say it without breaking something. "I don't know if I'm where I'm supposed to be," I said. Her expression changed immediately. Confusion first, then hurt. "What does that mean?" I looked away, because I couldn't hold her gaze and say it. "It means I'm not sure this is right anymore." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt before. "Where is this coming from?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer, because the truth had a name, and I wasn't ready to say it. "Where is this coming from?" she asked again, her voice sharper this time. I still didn't answer. I couldn't, because if I said her name, everything would collapse all at once. And some part of me, selfish, cowardly, wanted to believe I could control how this fell apart. "It's just me," I said. "I've been thinking about things." Emily stared at me, searching my face for something familiar, something she could hold on to. "And you came to this conclusion alone?" she asked. There was something different in her tone now. Less confusion, more clarity. I said nothing, and that was enough. Her shoulders dropped slightly, like a piece of a puzzle had just clicked into place. "There's someone else," she said. It wasn't a question. I shook my head immediately. "It's not like that." The second it left my mouth, I hated how it sounded. Because it was exactly like that. Then what is it like? She asked, her voice breaking just slightly. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How do you explain something that shouldn't have happened? How do you tell someone they did everything right, and it still wasn't enough? I didn't plan this, I said finally. Emily let out a short, empty laugh. People never do. She swung her legs off the bed, standing up, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself like it could hold her together. Have you? She stopped, swallowing. Have you cheated on me? No, I said quickly. No, I haven't. That, at least, was true. But it didn't feel like it mattered. She nodded slowly, but there was no relief in her expression. Do you wanna? She asked. The question hit harder than anything else, because it cut through everything. All the justifications, all the half-truths, all the ways I'd been avoiding calling this what it was. I hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. Emily closed her eyes for a second, like she was bracing herself. Wow, she whispered. I stepped forward instinctively. Emily, don't, she said, holding up a hand. I stopped, because there was nothing I could say that wouldn't make it worse. She turned away from me, running a hand through her hair, trying to steady herself. How long? She asked. A couple of weeks. She let out a shaky breath. A couple of weeks, she repeated. And you're already ready to throw all of this away? It's not about throwing it away, I said, though even I didn't believe it. Then what is it about? She demanded, turning back to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you met someone new, got bored, and decided I'm not enough anymore. That's not what this is, I said. Then explain it to me, she said, her voice rising. Because I don't understand how we go from planning a future to this. I opened my mouth and realized I didn't have an answer that would make sense to anyone but me. I don't have a good explanation, I said. It was the only honest thing left. Emily laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. Of course you don't, she said. Because there isn't one. She walked past me, out of the bedroom, and I followed a second later. She was already in the living room, pulling on a sweater with quick, uneven movements. What are you doing? I asked. I need some air, she said. I can't. She stopped, pressing her lips together. I can't sit here and listen to this like it's a normal conversation. It doesn't have to end like this, I said. The words came out before I could stop them, and the second I heard them, I realized how unfair they were. She turned to look at me, disbelief written all over her face. Then how does it end? She asked. You keep talking to her, and I just what? Wait until you figure out if she's better? No, I said, shaking my head. That's not what I'm saying. Then say what you mean, she said. I couldn't. Because what I meant was that I didn't want to lose her, and I didn't want to lose Lena. And those two things couldn't exist at the same time. Emily watched me in silence for a few seconds, and then something in her expression changed. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. You already chose, she said quietly. I frowned. What? You just don't want to admit it, she said. She grabbed her keys from the table, her movements calmer now, more certain. You chose the moment you started hiding things from me, she continued. You chose when you answered her messages instead of talking to me. You chose every time you looked at your phone and smiled and didn't tell me why. Each word landed heavier than the last. I didn't mean to hurt you, I said. I know, she replied. That's what makes it worse. She walked toward the door, then stopped, her hand on the handle. For a second, I thought she might turn around, that she might say something that would give me a way to fix this. Instead, she said, I hope she's worth it. And then she left. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. And just like that, everything I had built, years of it, was gone. The apartment felt different immediately. Empty, not physically, but in a way that made the silence feel louder than any argument we could have had. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, waiting for the feeling to hit. Regret, relief, something. But all I felt was stillness, like the world had paused, waiting for me to decide what came next. Eventually, I reached for my phone, opened our conversation, stared at her last message. You don't get to have both. My fingers hovered over the screen. This was it. The moment everything I'd done would finally make sense. Or fall apart completely. I typed. I chose. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. Okay. That was all she said. No excitement. No questions. No relief. Just that. My chest tightened. I ended things, I wrote. This time, her reply took longer. Long enough for doubt to creep in. Long enough for me to wonder if I'd misunderstood everything. Then, how? The question felt strange. Simple, but heavy. I told her the truth. I said. That wasn't entirely accurate, but it was close enough. Another pause. Then, do you feel better? I looked around the apartment. At the couch where we used to sit. At the kitchen where we talked about our future like it was guaranteed. At the door she'd just walked through. And I realized something I hadn't expected. No, I typed. There was a longer pause this time. Then Lena replied. Good. I stared at the message, my stomach dropping. What? Another pause. And then the message that made everything finally, completely clear. I didn't want to be the reason you left her, she wrote. I wanted you to be sure you would have left anyway. I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. I am sure, I typed quickly. But even as I sent it, doubt slipped in. Because I didn't know if that was true. And she could tell. You're not, she replied. And that's not something I can fix for you. I sat down slowly, the room suddenly feeling smaller. What are you saying? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Like she was choosing her words carefully. I'm saying this isn't how I want to start something real, she wrote. Not as a question mark. My heart started to race. So that's it. I typed. You just walk away? I'm not walking away, she said. I'm just not stepping in. The distinction hit harder than anything else. Because it meant the choice I thought I'd made wasn't enough. You told me to choose, I wrote. I told you to be honest, she replied. Not to pick me. I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a second. Because suddenly, there was no version of this where I didn't lose something. I don't understand, I said. I know, she replied. And then, after a moment. That's why this wouldn't work. The chat went quiet after that. No typing. No follow-up. Nothing. I tried to think of something to say, something that would change her mind, something that would pull her back into the version of this I'd imagined. But every sentence felt wrong. Too late. Or just not true. So I did nothing. And for the first time since I met her, there was no message coming. No next step. No distraction. Just silence. Real silence. The kind you can't fill by reaching for your phone. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Maybe hours. At some point, it got dark outside. The apartment stayed quiet. And it finally hit me. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just a slow, heavy realization settling in. I hadn't chosen between two people. I had walked away from one. For the possibility of another. And in the end, I had neither.